Welcome back, everybody, to the Denver Dzogchen podcast. I'm here once again with Joseph Wagner, and it looks like, Joe, what did you do to your eye?
Well, the first rule of Fight Club, Damien, is that we don't talk about Fight Club, okay?
Okay, I understand. So I'm very excited to talk today about aspiration prayers. This is something that we mentioned we would get to, and so now we are. This is really our rudder on the path. So I think there's so much to say, so I'll let Joe let you just get into it.
Okay. Well, aspirations, the whole of the Mahayana is based on the aspiration that we're going to try to attain Buddhahood for the good of all beings, right? But the bodhicitta resolve and the bodhisattva vow that goes with it is a type of aspiration, right? It's an alignment with a future goal that we will then, with luck, that alignment will start to pull us in that direction starting now. So I think that's the most famous type of aspiration that one can make, and most important as well, because we often find, if the path becomes just about me and my practice and it's not going well or it is going well, whatever, that's not really in line with the Mahayana view of things. And of course, like it or not, Vajrayana is inside of Mahayana and Dzogchen is inside of Vajrayana, whatever other people might say about that. Um, but I think that aspiration has a lot of other uses and benefits, and they're definitely worth considering, and kind of learning about how to use these in our own lives to move our lives forward in all kinds of beneficial ways.
Mhm. So one of the things that I think is sometimes confusing for people is the difference between grasping and an aspiration. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit because I know I've spent a lot of my path stressed out that I'm not progressing fast enough, which isn't particularly useful and I don't think is what is meant by aspirations. So maybe you could parse out a little bit the difference between aspiring and grasping or stressing
Mhm.
about progress.
Well, I think aspirations are actually a way to let go of grasping and let go of the stress related to daily assessment of how your path is going. When you get, like yourself, you're a serious practitioner, it's a main thing on your mind every day. And myself is the same. And it's sometimes easy to be kind of disappointed because first of all, it's almost impossible to judge one's own progress, and, or lack of progress for that matter. We're always our emotions and our mental view of things going up and down based on circumstances all the time. And to get enough space, enough perspective to really judge your own path is probably almost impossible. So that's first of all something that really only your teacher, your spiritual guides, your Kalyana Mitra, whatever, can do. It's not possible to judge one's own uh, progress on the path. And in fact, oftentimes progress looks like falling back. You say like, okay, I'm gonna meditate. So say your practice is that you're doing 20 minutes of sitting every day or something, which was pretty good, and you say like, okay, I'm gonna practice for an hour every day. But in your first 2 weeks, you only practice for an hour 3 days, and the other days you just do your regular 20 minutes. That would maybe look like a failure, from your own perspective. But actually taking a step back, think like, wow, you tripled your practice time 3 out of 14 days. Give that a double thumbs up. Or as Lama Wangdu used to do, thumbs up on top of a thumbs up. But for us, we might feel actually depressed and it might bring us down. So just to put that in perspective, one should be very careful about judging one's own path. The question is just, did you practice today? As I've said many times, and I really stick by, this is one of my main things I'm working on with our little Sangha and the other people that I connect with this year, is that when you wake up in the morning, this is our waking life, we come out of nowhere. You look back into that, where were you? Nowhere, like you were gone. You're in a kind of like luminosity, emptiness. And when you fall asleep, you go right back into that. So we really only have today. I've been waking up for many years and thinking, well, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and then I'm also going to do that. And then when I wake up, it's never tomorrow. It's always today. So the main thing I think for practitioners is to stay in today. We can do a lot in today. We can't do anything tomorrow because it never arrives. And yesterday, where is yesterday? I looked here in my notebook and I checked in the cabinet and I could not find a single bit of yesterday. Totally gone. Imaginary. Totally. Only the vaguest of memories, right? We have no idea what we did. If I said, like, what'd you have for dinner last Thursday, you'd have to really think about it, right? Unless you got one of those diets where you eat the same thing every day. So letting go, excuse me, letting go of yesterday and not being too engaged with what's going to happen tomorrow is the way of the practitioner, right? We should have short-term aims, and the best short-term aims can be accomplished today. That said, and from that perspective, it's actually very, very difficult to reach into the future. How does one influence the future when A, the future never really arrives, and B, circumstances are changing all the time. Our own ideas about what we want are changing all the time. That's why I've come up with a way of using aspirations that I think is really beneficial, and it fits perfectly in with the Dzogchen way. But before we talk about that, I want to finish about stress and worry and this kind of thing. Once you enter the path, and which for Vajrayana people, entering the path means receiving empowerment, right? Once you receive empowerment, we are to see all events in our lives in one of two categories. So really only one category, but we split them because we experience it differently. One category is what we call good things, things we want, things that are pleasant. You get a unexpected check for $500 in the mail, or you think your car is going to need $2,000 worth of work and it only needs $400 worth of work, whatever. When good things happen, we're supposed to frame that within the idea, this is a blessing from the Lama. This is a blessing from the Buddhas. They're removing obstacles for me and giving me what I want. And isn't that awesome? So you can rejoice. And then if bad things happen, which, as we know, what we call bad is sometimes really good. And what we call good is oftentimes pretty negative. So in terms of how it unfolds, but when something bad happens, we get sick, I get a problem with my eye, whatever. The way to frame that, of course, is this is my obstacles being removed. In order to be liberated from samsara, go to Sukhavati or one of the pure realms, or to actually attain Buddhahood in the Bardo or in this life, we can't have a whole lot of negative karma around. So we have to keep in mind that, that karma needs to be purified. That's what Vajrasattva practice is for, and so much of the practice of the Vajrayana generally is about that. But it's hard to just eliminate bad karma, make it like just wash it away. Hey, I did this stuff, but now I don't have to pay the price. It doesn't work that way. Usually, the best we can do is kind of the funnel effect. We had this much bad karma, but when we experienced it only as this much. And that's the sort of special feature of the Vajrayana, is that we can experience and purify our negative karma, but in a way where we don't have to experience it as intensely or as horribly as maybe it would we would expect to based on our previous actions. That's the amazing feature of the Vajrayana, and the whole reason that it's possible to attain enlightenment in one lifetime. Yeah. So, what we think, I'm not doing enough, I'm not practicing hard enough. We are not in a position to judge. So just like we put bad things are a blessing in terms of purification and good things are a blessing in terms of, the teacher smiling at us or whatever, we can also put our inability to judge our circumstances on the Lama. We can just say, hey, Garchen Rinpoche or Hudson Palo or whoever your Guru Rinpoche for that matter, I can't tell, but I hope I'm doing all right and let me know. And then it's not on your side. So I say it to you, but to all of our listeners, there's not much value in judging too closely. The best we can do to conclude this part of it, Tulku Urgyen used to say, before every session, make the aspiration, this time I'm not going to get distracted. I'm going to make this worth it. And when we practice on Tuesday nights, we all make the aspiration, the person who sat down for this session is not going to be the one who gets up. There's going to be a new person with more inspiration, maybe more knowledge, maybe more insight, maybe more psyched upness, whatever. We should do that at the beginning of every session. At the end, it's okay to check. How did I do? Was I totally distracted? Was I only distracted half the time? How is that compared to my last session? This is fine to do, but in general, can't judge. So better to let the Lama judge. That's what I have to say about that stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day about how I'm often, considering that probably if I really was going to attain Buddhahood in one life, it would probably mean I'd have to be in retreat for a significant chunk of the rest of my life. And so when we're praying and making these aspirations, if our life starts to fall apart, that might be us going in the direction of exactly what we're asking for and wanting, even though that would be an extremely unpleasant experience. Right. So I think that we can't judge what's happening. We don't sometimes these things that appear so negative are really rearranging our life. And I've already seen this in my life many times that things that were apparently negative set me up to do much better on the path. They were things I had to go through. And so we don't always know what's negative and what's positive anyway.
Absolutely. I think you're totally right. I think you're 100% right. I quote Tulku Urgyen again because he's, my personal authority and a pretty solid, reliable authority generally for this stuff. He said, just to respond to what you're saying, when many people, when they first get involved in, especially in Dzogchen, where they say, oh, meditate in the morning, you're a Buddha in the morning. Recognize at night, you're a Buddha at night. These kind of Dzogchen sort of propaganda, as I call it. When we get those kind of teachings, we think, I can do this. I'm going to attain the rainbow body. I got this. Uh, and then it doesn't work out quite that well and so forth. Tulku Urgyen said to me that if you want to attain Buddhahood in one life, you need to not do any samsaric activities. You need to be in full-time in retreat. You need to do 4 whatever sessions per day of 3 hours or whatever. You need to not talk, and you can't talk to anyone. That means for us, no texting and so forth. You have to be a full-time practitioner who really cuts off their connection to the 8 worldly concerns. Who can do such a thing these days? I mean, we don't have a supportive environment like they did in Tibet. If you go live in a cave in Colorado, you'll either be arrested or you will freeze to death, something like that. It's not going to be people bringing you food. I mean, like that would be wonderful, but we don't have that environment yet. We kind of we have to. I'm not discouraging anyone who wants to do this. There are great practitioners like Yeshe Dorje who lived in, he's done 4 or maybe even 5 3 retreats. Incredible, right? And my palms are together for anyone who has this kind of commitment. But for most of us, that's out of reach, right? You have a family, I have responsibilities too, and so forth. To really withdraw from samsara in such a way that we have no engagements, that's very tough. So, in the same way that we aren't sure if things are good or bad, we can also put on the shelf the attainment of Buddhahood in one life, unless we're willing to give everything. And it's possible, and I think it's wonderful. Uh, it's just rare. So that leaves us with the other good outcome, the only other good outcome of a practitioner's life in a sense. And what Tulku Urgyen said was that's called liberation. What does liberation mean? It means you're reborn in a pure realm. And we've talked about pure realms before, and we can even do a whole session on that sometime if you want. But liberation means that we have practiced sufficient prayers to Amitabha and Poa and so forth that we start to feel in our own lives like confident that when we die, whether we die in a beautiful way, sitting up and in Tukdam and perform Poa in a beautiful way, the top of our head bursts off and hair falls out and people are prostrating, their ring cell, whatever, that'd be incredible. Or whether we die in a car accident, right? Uh, that we have some confidence that we're not going to return to the 6 realms. So this is something to talk in depth about in another podcast, but that really is possible. And we can link that up with aspirations, right? Because what we're doing when we make aspirations is the way I define it is we're shooting arrows into the future. It's very difficult to reach the future, very difficult to influence even what's going to happen tomorrow, right? I mean, I don't really know, right? Right now I have an idea. Okay, maybe this and then also that. Anything can happen, right? And change that around. But when we do aspirations, we get a chance to shoot arrows into the future. And I'm going to explain how we do it, and maybe that'll be helpful for people. We'll see.
Yeah, I would love to hear your method. And it's really I think, so helpful to think in these terms. We have to be realistic about what it is we can do with this lifetime, and that was hard for me to accept. It's still hard for me to accept. I want to do more than I have the karmic situation for, but I have to accept, as you said, the karmic limitations are my karmic limitations, the result of my countless lifetimes of choices. And so it is what it is, and making it worse by feeling like I should be doing something else isn't helpful. But we do have these extraordinary methods like Pure Land practice and POA and these things that we can take on, and short-term retreats and things. So we have a lot we can work with, and we definitely should have an episode about Pure Lands. So we'll leave that for the future. But yes, please share with us, how do we practice aspirations in such a way that they are the most fruitful and don't cause more grasping?
Hmm. Well, I'm not sure if this will fit into that rubric. That's a pretty tall, because anytime you make an aspiration, there's some part of you that wants that, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's important to break aspirations down into two aspects. The first aspect is the aspiration itself, which is a conceptual notion, right? It's a thought or a statement or something like that. May I go to Disneyland in 2025, right? If that's your aspiration, then you have to state that. If you don't make a plan, then as Terence McKenna used to say, you have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you become part of somebody else's plan. And I think this is very good to notice, because there are plenty of people who would love to have us be instruments in the accomplishment of their plans. But we need to have our own plan, right? That's what it is to be a Vajrayana practitioner, is to have some degree of Rangwang, autonomy, right? In fact, right now we're entirely Shenwang, which means under the influence of other. Our circumstances, our families, our job, our physical bodies, our illnesses, our being punched out, whatever it happens to be. These things are influencing us. The goal is to turn it into as much self-power, Rangwang, or autonomy as we can. So, in terms of aspirations, we need to state our aspiration, and the clearer and shorter it is, the better. And I say, like, if your aspiration is to practice for the rest of your life in retreat, as they used to say when I was teaching school, chunk it. Break it up into pieces that you can accomplish. That's a huge thing. How would I ever accomplish that? So you might say, hey, may I do 1 month of retreat this year? And then if you are able to accomplish it, then you're like, okay, I needed to do these things to do that. So maybe next year I can do 2 months, or maybe I can do 6 months, or maybe I can practice until noon every day, or whatever. Breaking them down into chunkable, measurable goals is one thing. And then putting it together, like, may I do 1 month of retreat this year? Let's say that's your aspiration. So there's the conceptual notion of that. And that's like, I use the analogy of archery because I'm into archery a little bit. So you've got the bow, you've got the string, you've got the arrow. We use this, the arrow. On the back of the arrow, there's a notch, and you knock that on the bowstring, and then you pull the bow back and pull the string back in order to fire the arrow. Most people think that aspirations are knocking it, that's kind of coming up with the aspiration, and then pulling it back, making the statement, may I do 1 year of retreat or 1 month of retreat, and then that's it. And you just put everything down, right? The arrow didn't fly. You have to let go. This is the same thing in Dzogchen as it is in aspiration making, as it is in archery, right? To fire an arrow, you are not throwing the arrow, right? You are putting the knock on the bowstring, you're pulling back, and then you are letting go. At which time the physics of the situation takes over. The bow retracts, the arrow is fired into wherever it's going, toward the target. And once it's gone, it's out of your hands. And this brings us to the second part of the aspirations. And this can really be used for anything, but good to do it for Dharma stuff primarily, right? Since we're Dharma people. We say, may I do 1 month of retreat in 2025, right? Making it as specific as possible, but not so specific that, you could accomplish it and also not accomplish it at the same time, right? Just leaving it reasonably open. That's putting it on and then letting go. Letting be, right? If you're a Dzogchen person and you've received these transmissions of the how to recognize the mind nature, then that's what you do. If you don't have that or you're not confident, all you have to do is just not do anything. Many people, they've got their aspiration. That's the arrow, right? And they think, all I have to do is hold on to this aspiration. I will accomplish my goals. May I do a month of retreat? May I do a month but you still have it in your hand, right? How can it even get to the future? How can it align things so that this comes true? You must let go of it, right? And so much in our lives, we are required to hold as tightly as possible. No wonder we're so stressed, right? We have to hold in our minds when our son's graduation is, and we have to hold in our minds that there's a recall on my car. I have to take it in, and we have to hold in our minds blah and birthdays and oh my God, so much. And we're doing that so much even with our aspirations. But in this case, we are allowed to let go. So we put the aspiration in the aspiration bow-o-meter by thinking, may I do a month of retreat in 2025? And then don't do anything. Totally let go. You might not be able to meditate like Tulku Urgyen. I still can't after all these years, but I can meditate like Joe Wagner, and I can do my best and my best approximation of letting be. It doesn't have to be let go forever. It doesn't have to be not thinking of that ever again, like they do in some forms of modern Western magical traditions, which can work, but we're not here to talk about that right now. It just means for a moment. When you shoot an arrow, it's not that you never think about arrows ever again, or not even pick up that arrow later. It's that you must let go of it. But that only takes like that. So you make the aspiration and then that's it. Move along. And the arrow of that aspiration is already flying. It's arranging, it's working toward that goal. And of course, it pulls on your heart. So it's not that you don't think about it again. Every time you think about it, it's okay to make another aspiration. May I do that? You do that a few times, and it starts to feel like I have no choice but to do this. So you're going to align your life to make that thing come true. This even works for outrageous things. I just talking to someone recently who really felt sad that they had not met Dundrum Rinpoche, who passed away, Yeshe Dorje, Jigdral Yeshe Dorje, who passed away in 1987. And, I encouraged them, why don't you see if maybe you can have a dream of Dundrum Rinpoche? And they asked me how to do it. I told the same thing, like, may I dream of Dundrum Rinpoche? Let be. And then move along. Next time you think of Dundrum Rinpoche, may I have a dream of Dundrum Rinpoche? Let be. And lo and behold, they had a dream of Dundrum Rinpoche, receiving an empowerment. Pretty amazing, right? Or
Yeah.
true fulfillment. Now, dreams are a good example because it's almost impossible for ordinary people, at least for myself, to say, okay, tonight I'm going to dream of playing volleyball with Richard Nixon. Very difficult, right, to accomplish. But combining these things, some part of you, whether we call that subconscious, unconscious, whatever, maybe the deities, who knows who's listening, something can arrange these things in our lives, and it is almost magic. In that particular case, it really looks like magic. They certainly had their minds blown. So I think this is the best thing to do, and we got to do it for absolutely everything. Of course, we don't want to aspire to many negative things because you never know, right? You think for a second, oh, I'd like to put an arrow in my neighbor's dog, and the next thing you know, the arrow's released and it's hard to control once it's gone. So you have to be a little careful. So make your aspirations as wholesome as possible, is my advice, because you know be careful what you wish for is a real warning. And it is when we align our minds, especially as practitioners, right? Whether you practice shamatha formally or not, shamatha is part of all practices. So your mind becomes more sharp and a little bit more powerful, even for the most low level practitioner. And things can happen as a result of directing your attention. So you have to be a little careful. That's why I don't recommend too many aspirations for worldly things. Otherwise, you're in the circumstance of the monkey's paw, that famous story where I want my child to come back, and he comes back as a as a zombie, right? Not what you want, right? I want a lot of money, and then it happens because your parents get killed. Like, like we have to be a little careful. But aspirations like, may I go to Sukhavati at the moment of my death, or may I feel more and more like practicing every day. May all of my thoughts be permeated by kindness. This kind of stuff is really worth doing.
Yeah. And for people who the archery metaphor doesn't quite work, I immediately thought of gardening. It's also like sticking a seed in the ground and watering it. You don't pull the seed back out and put it back in the packet after you're done. You leave it in the ground. So
Right.
it's just like the letting go of the arrow. Um, and so I heard Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche at a teaching I went to on aspiration prayers. He talked about the importance of making aspiration prayers as big and ridiculous as possible.
Mm.
And so you talked about the specificity side, where when we're doing like really, I want to achieve something this year in a very concrete way. I want to spend a week in retreat or whatever. So could you talk a little bit about these bigger ones? Like we do the King of Aspiration prayers. It's as big as you could possibly imagine a request to be. What's going on there?
Well, I do think it's important to make your aspirations as vast as you can. It helps. There's some value in believing in it, although I encourage our listeners to try it. Go ahead and try it. It's quite amazing how well it can work. But once you have the feeling like, oh, this is really possible, then yeah, make the largest aspirations you can. May everyone who sees me feel like meditating. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? Then you just have to show your face at Target and you have a lot of people in Samadhi. That'd be amazing, right? And some
Yeah.
masters do have this. So I completely concur with Rinpoche when he says make them as big as possible. I usually tell people don't be cheap with your aspirations. Make it big, right? And the best aspiration is may I attain Buddhahood immediately for the good of everyone. That's the real way we can benefit others because so long as we're under the delusion that we exist as a separate real thing, then everything we do is kind of for us. We have this kind of like samsaric view on everything that we just can't shake. So may I let go of that and then let be. May I, attain the rainbow body and then let be. I tell you a story. I have a friend, he lives in Asia now, and he's been a practitioner for many, many years, like much longer than I have. He's in his 70s. And we were talking about what you just what we think is possible. Well, how far can we actually take this? And I said, yeah, how far do you think you can really get in this life? This was a couple of years ago. And he said, I'm still shooting for the rainbow body. I thought that was terrific. So we have nothing wrong with doing both, right? May I do a month of retreat, or may I do a 3-day retreat, right? Something really like definitely accomplishable. We can use the aspiration method for that. And we can also, may I never again be angry. May anger be eliminated from my system. Let be. May my tendencies to be selfish completely be eradicated this moment. Those are pretty vast, right? And pretty, many people would say like outrageous. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. The thing here is we're not putting any pressure on ourselves, right? It's like going to, in the story of Jorge Luis Borges, The Lottery at Babylon. If anyone knows him, he's such an amazing author, Argentinian author, and he wrote a lot of fantastic stories. Lottery at Babylon was one. And in it, there's a notion that there's this crack in this stone wall that if you write something down that you want to happen and you put it in there, then it will happen. This kind of idea, right? Or a wishing well, this kind of notion. Once you put it in, it's out of your hands, right? Whether someone's on the other side of that wall pulling it out and saying, okay, Joe wants to do 3 days of retreat, or there's nothing except our own sort of psychic orientation, we don't have to worry about it. It's not our problem, so to speak. That's why voice your aspirations as large as possible and then let go of them. Letting go is the very heart of the path, right? The very essence, right? The Buddha said suffering is inseparable from life. It has a cause. What's the cause? Grasping. What's the opposite of grasping? Letting go. So it doesn't matter if you're practicing Shravaka level or you think you're practicing Dzogchen level, supposedly those are very different. The letting go part is consistent. And we can let go all the time. We do it every night when we go to sleep, right? Nobody can be like, I'm going to sleep now. And you have to be like, okay, right?
Yeah.
Same thing here. We just need to, it takes a little faith to try it, but once you try it a few times, you will know. It works.
It seems to me that there's a little bit of a refining that goes on here too. Like I've been saying the King of Aspiration prayers for 20 years. And when I first said it, it just seemed ridiculous, right? Like this fantasy of something that maybe, maybe exists, but I've never experienced anything like that. To now when I say it, there's something like I can touch it. Like it happens in the aspiration. So to me that not only are you planting seeds for your future possibilities, but the aspiration can start to mingle with your experience and you can get a taste. And, because of course, letting go is at least a simulacrum or a bit of that ultimate goal. Just letting go is. And so we can start to like fuse these two together, it seems to me, in some way. What's your thoughts about that?
I think that's excellent. Yeah. And for people who aren't familiar, I think Damien's referring to the King of Aspiration Prayers, which is a chapter in the Avatar or Avatamsaka
Other
Sutra.
from socket. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful prayer in which you're saying, I will save as many beings as there are atoms in all of the universe. And this kind of incredible, huge Mahayana kind of uh, aspirations. Indians were big into this sort of vast stuff. And for anybody who doesn't know it, it's easy to find. I think it's on Lotsawa House, and it's
Yeah.
a gorgeous, gorgeous aspiration. Last time we did it, actually, I almost couldn't continue. I had tears in my eyes. I was like, wow, this is so profound and beautiful. The That's just about what that prayer is. I think that what is interesting is by making aspirations and sort of really leaving it up to the universe, so to speak, or our guru or the dakinis, whoever you put in there as the ones carrying this out, or even your own psyche, just by letting go and it's out there in the noosphere or whatever, what is possible to start to experience is the fact that we're actually in a pure realm now. The world is not the way we see it. We really see it based on our grasping, based on an incredibly powerful notion that what is out there is totally separate from us and is real things. And in here is a real person who needs to gain enlightenment or something. These are so confused that it's almost impossible to even you can't even correct it. It needs to be completely eliminated in a sense. And I think because of the power of prayers like the one you're talking about, this can start to naturally happen, right? That it isn't that we are necessarily like fusing, which has this sense of like, I have two pieces of metal, I'm going to heat them up, then I'm going to pound them together in my forge and make them into one. It's not really like that. It's more like you start to see that things are not as fixed as we thought. In fact, they're not fixed at all. According to that very aspiration prayer, we're operating in many worlds at once. And we might not be able to see that because of our, very narrow view of things, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. That is the actual way it is. So it seems to me that what aspirations generally teach you, I guess we could say, is that anything is possible. The world is not the way we think it is. We think, we have this current administration in Washington and who knows, everyone's terrified of what's going to happen. This might just not be accurate from a little bit higher perspective, and we live in this base level, or I do. And as a result, I'm, driven by these pieces of news or whatever, but there are many levels. And the more aspirations and the more letting go that we do, the more these things start to appear naturally as how they actually are, according to the teachings.
Yeah, just like when we talked in a previous episode about the llama being like a hole in the matrix. We're seeing through. It's a crack in this solidity that we're so immersed in, and it's almost like the aspiration prayer can do something similar. You showed me one of your lamas who's still in Tibet practicing today, and it was like really inspiring to me. It's like this still exists. There is still, he knows nothing probably about our political nonsense. He has no, he's not even in that universe right now. And he exists somewhere on this world practicing like that. That gives me a lot of hope. Like, I don't have to be part of that. Like, I don't have to be so caught up in whatever the media tells me is one perspective of this world. Like, that's not his perspective. I guarantee it. That's not what he's thinking about all day long.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about a modern day Tertan who lives in the presence of Guru Rinpoche and carries out Guru Rinpoche's wishes right now. This is happening right now. And that is incredibly inspiring. I sent that same picture to my brother and who's a student of that teacher. And he said when he saw it, he had to sit down. He was like, I gotta take a minute to sit down and kind of chill a little bit because, you know, it's amazing. I think that this really has to do with letting go, letting go of our ideas, right? Tulku Urgyen always used to say the mind of an accomplished person is like the sky. It holds nothing. It's very vast. While the mind of a sentient being is like a pinprick through a leather bag, tiny little whole. So develop as much of a scope as we can. And what is that really? Letting go. The mind is already as vast as it needs to be. It's just that we narrow it down by selecting one thing, focusing on it, and excluding everything else. This is exactly how samsara works, right? And almost always that thing we're focusing on is something that I want or something I want to get rid of. Those are two of the three poisons, right? And anytime you focus on one thing and exclude everything else, then you're practicing ignoring those things, right? Which is the third. So any engagement we have with samsara is going to be driven by our confusion and is going to be in the rubric of the three poisons anyway. What's the opposite of that? Letting go. When I think about the Teratan in Tibet, I think he's the king of letting go. He is not holding anything in his mind. I'm sure he's heard the name Trump, and who knows what he would say. A lot of Tibetans are very conservative in their political views. But if you asked him, but I guarantee this stuff is not running around in his mind, right? His mind is very vast, and that is the teaching. It's also the example of the teachers, right? For us, is that it's safe. We have to feel it's safe. We need to, at some point, accept that this is out of our control and letting be in that. And if we do that combined with the aspirations, then very frequently those things will happen, right? But even if they don't, as long as we're not fixated on it, then it's okay. Things are unfolding. It's more about being as spacious and open as we can. And when you do make aspirations, make them as big as possible. Someone told me they make aspirations that, and I took this up too, everyone who sees me will be inspired. Wow. That's kind of like on one hand, you might think, oh my God, that's incredibly arrogant. But on the other hand, what better way to spread what we have inside the Dharma, right? This insight into who we really are, than by just broadcasting it by being. That's what we all want to do, right? And some teachers are like this. I have several teachers who, just by seeing their face, you're like, wow, the Dalai Lama is like that. And people are quite blown away just by seeing him. Garchen Rinpoche in Arizona, exactly like this. You just see him and you're just like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. In fact, everything is okay, which is the actual message of Buddhism anyway.
Yeah, it all kind of reminds me a little bit of that profound emptiness teaching of Alice in Wonderland. In throughout that story, it's like time and size and all of these things are just perspectives, and you can change your perspective at any time. And it's like from one point of view, things are like this, and from another point of view, things are like this. It's just how vast you allow your mind to be. And so we're trying to just get our mind bigger so that we can hold more points of view more and this also makes us like a much better person too, right? Because we can talk to somebody maybe who holds these views that we disagree with and think of course there's some truth in what they're saying. There's truth in everybody's position, and we need to be able to see each other's position so that we don't want to kill each other. We need to understand, like be able to sympathize and have empathy for even great evil beings, what we think of like Hitler or whatever, very, very confused and suffering very, very greatly and will continue to suffer greatly. And so we have to have some kind of compassion. Otherwise, we're keeping ourselves way too small. And then ourselves become this kind of monster who's unable to open ourselves to a bigger possibility that allows for even views we disagree with. Like that's the basis of democracy. It's just being able to talk with somebody you disagree with.
Yeah, tolerance, right? Tolerating that. Just a Western Tulku I know told me that the definition of patience is not reacting. And wow, how simple, right? Just not reacting, just being like, hey, this person is saying this right now. Who knows if this is really how they feel? Because as we start to talk, of course, we try to get everything aligned so we can be consistent internally and so forth. Letting people spout off about whatever and not letting that, trigger you is excellent. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be engaged politically for those who wish that. I mean, not making general statements like that. But I am saying that an attitude of tolerance makes, just as you said, you don't want to kill people as much, and you also you're exhibiting for them what's possible. Not
Yeah.
like a Tai Chi master, not taking the blow, but avoiding the blow. Just not, not not reacting. We have so much reaction, which is what we see in the world so much now. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what does this have to do with? Bringing it home to letting go of our ideas. We become so convinced that we're right about stuff, and then that becomes like a little piece in our mind, and it takes up a space. And someone says, like, what do you think about Ukraine or whatever? You have your whole little prepared statement. It's totally not necessary. Totally
Yeah.
not necessary. Not that there aren't better or worse or more beneficial or less beneficial positions, but part of being a practitioner, it seems to me, is to try to be as in the moment responsive from a base of love and compassion as we can be. And if the world took this up, we wouldn't have nearly as many problems. But we don't have to worry about the world. We just have to worry about ourselves. And so we can even use that as an aspiration. May I be more tolerant? May I be less reactive? May I not feel it so personally when someone is like in my face? If you can do that, wow, it frees you. And that freedom is being free like that is a teaching for everyone. So it all comes down to the exact same thing, right? Less grasping means less suffering. Hello.
And being willing to admit that maybe you don't know. Like if my 13-year-old self's aspirations have come true, that would be a nightmare. Like I wanted to be a rock star for most of my teenage years. And now I look at rock stars, I'm like, God, that looks awful. I could never sleep on a bus for a week straight. So we don't even necessarily know what's best for us. And so thinking having a flexible mind and being able to let go, it is the heart of growth and the path and everything. We don't even know what's best for ourselves. That's the truth. And we have to be open to whatever comes.
Yeah, I wanted also to say something else that occurred to me based on something you said before. The English author and philosopher Colin Wilson, who died not long ago, wrote maybe 100 books. Very interesting guy. I saw an interview with him fairly recently in which he said something that I really think is useful for me. It's been beneficial to me. He said, the ant's eye view of a situation is always changing because it's so close up, right? Something moves just a little bit, it's a totally different thing. But the bird's eye view doesn't change nearly as much. So the whole process of becoming a more complete human being is trying to have the bird's eye view about more things more often, right? Of course, you know, we have our own opinions about things, and some things we're more experts about than others. And so that's a more close-up view. But the more we can gain perspective, the more we can be like a bird, right? A bird looks down and Denver looks the same as it did, 2 years ago, more or less. Then not so many changes. But on the ground, oh my God, that's a new building and that business is out and the pizza place closed or whatever, right? And all the cars are moving from down here. It's like everything is chaos and so hard to control. The more perspective you have, the higher your view is. And that's not in a Buddhist sense, but just in this way I'm talking about. The more the more okay things are, the more stable things are, the more happy one can be because you're not
Yeah.
as influenced and beat up by all these different things that are occurring right in your face. So going from the ant's view to the bird's view as much as we can, it frees us. It's a good thing for the world and it makes you happier too. So it's good. Good. I
Yeah.
like how he put that.
I love that. It reminds me of that photo that they released not long ago from Mars of Earth, this tiny blue dot, right? It probably looks exactly the same as it did thousands of years ago. So having that pulled back view Totally. Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today about aspiration prayers. And I think we definitely need to do one on Pure Lands because that's a perfect segue from aspirations. So maybe we'll do that one
Yeah,
next.
I love it.
Um, but thank you, Joe. And thank you to all of you who listen, like, and subscribe our show. We really appreciate you. We appreciate that you follow us and like us. It really means a lot. And I hope you continue to enjoy it. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.